A while back, Hassan Minhaj interviewed Jill Lepore, and I saw them having this conversation on TikTok about Batman's politics. It gave me the idea for this video.
Do you think Batman would vote for Donald Trump?
So really, which Batman? Adam West, no. The Christopher Nolan Batman, yes. What do you think?
I don't think Nolan Batman. Nolan Batman definitely is not registered to vote.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Because propaganda is all around us. And sometimes you have to wonder, are the pop culture pillars that we were raised on billionaire propaganda? Or does propaganda bleed into apolitical spaces to such a degree that it poisons everything? Or is it all unfair criticism of something that is meant to be an innocent escape from our chaotic timeline? So how about Batman's fortune? Billionaires are inherently problematic and shouldn't exist, because in order to become a billionaire, you have to exploit people or contribute to declining conditions for the majority of the population, as well as the climate. Worker exploitation is one of the worst parts about capitalism. You also have to hoard money to be a billionaire. If said person wasn't a billionaire and wasn't making so much money or exploiting so many people, that money could go to workers and decrease an ever-increasing wage gap. So is it problematic that Batman beats up people that are forced into crime because of that ever-increasing income inequality? On a surface level, yes. But things are nuanced. First of all, they did retcon Batman's fortune in a series called Joker Wars, where the Joker steals the majority of Bruce Wayne's wealth, making him a millionaire.
We all could be so lucky.
Sure, being a millionaire is very privileged, but you can actually be a millionaire and have a lot of money without ever actually exploiting someone. Whereas to be a billionaire, it's pretty impossible to not exploit thousands of people. Daily. Hourly even.
By the second.
There are labor millionaires from sports, medicine, law, investments, insurance. There are labor millionaires all over the place. So, and I'm sure a lot of them have exploited people too, to be fair, but much less so than billionaires. And billionaires can actually make a dent in solving our problems on the planet. Many writers and creators of Batman are aware of some of the antiquated aspects of Batman, though. But there are other things to keep in mind, too. Like maybe Batman is a story about trying to influence privilege in a different direction. Isn't the point of Batman, after all, to say let's make someone ultra-rich actually kind of altruist? Even if that's unrealistic. Because guess what? This might shock you. Bear with me for a second. Batman isn't real. Who cares if that's unrealistic? It's wildly unrealistic, and in fact, if even one billionaire gave away their wealth to do something like Batman, it wouldn't make a difference, to be honest, so it's stupid too. So it's an unrealistic concept, but society has also devolved to a place of extreme wealth that so many writers could not have anticipated in the 1900s. Even if this point in capitalism was always inevitable, which it was, I'll cut them some slack. Now, have we ever actually seen Batman exploit anyone as well for as rich as he is? Well, he is CEO of Wayne Enterprises, so in our reality, he definitely would be exploiting a lot of people and making everyone's life shitty. But for all we know, in that universe, all of his employees could be making $200,000 a year, and the janitors make $300,000. That's what I call based. Like, actually based, not like that bullshit that Asmongold does. I hate that guy. It's fantasy. It's a made-up town in a made-up universe. I don't feel as though we always have to project our own dystopian reality onto the pop culture that we enjoy. There's been a lot of incredible art that didn't necessarily always say capitalism is bad. Don't get me wrong, we need way more of that. Like, we need so much more art that points out our dystopian realities, but again, it's okay if you don't too. Again, there's been so much incredible art made that didn't do that. And I think that's what upsets people, is that there's been not enough art made that points out the dystopian realities of capitalism. And therefore, we complain about that. There's been so much art made that didn't do that, that was incredible. Ultimately, I feel as though art is a form of activism, so we should be doing this within art. But it is kind of scary to say that a fictional world makes more sense than our own. Sure, power corrupts in a capitalist system, and those workers would be exploited in real life, but Batman isn't real life. Batman is also clearly about making one of the rich, that is typically supposed to be somebody like Lex Luthor, a good guy. Lex Luthor is, after all, a depiction of the typical evil billionaire within that same universe. So with that example alone, it's clear what the majority of DC writers intend with the story of Batman. And sure, I get the jokes about Batman beating up on people for petty crime, but I think there are very few examples that you can find of Batman actually doing this. And where these examples do exist, well, there will always be rogue adaptations in comic books. And if you do have an example, feel free to post it in the comments and prove me wrong, because I don't really care if I'm wrong about this. It's kind of a meaningless topic. Why am I even making this video? So random. I think it's my worst video. Anyways, with varying adaptations, you can always assume there are Bad Apple Batman from the Bad Apple DC universes. And now you're telling me there's no such thing as a bad apple. One bad apple spoils the bunch. And that's right. Fuck ice.
Get the fuck out of my house.
Not.
Ooh. That shit's sour. I bit into the apple and now I feel like I have to eat it. Sorry. I mean, I guess this is like my first mukbang content, and it's kind of nice because, like, I don't know, it's not. I'm being healthy, right? That's the funny thing, right? Something like that. But I don't know, something like that. Comic books aren't the police. There's nothing inherently corruptible about comic books. And comic books are historically the source of a lot of altruist, good-hearted storytelling, with also a lot of support for human rights causes. Now, as for Batman villains, Scarecrow comes from privilege. The Joker comes from privilege to an extent. All the Batman villains really pretty much come from some degree of privilege. They're all white, am I right? And look, Batman isn't curb stomping Delonte West for not pulling himself up by his Jordan high tops. Kobe! No, I'm not done with it yet, so like, chill. I'll Kobe it in a little bit, okay? Even if there was the rare comic book adaptation of Batman murdering the unhoused, those one-off comics aren't representative of what the character is supposed to be about. In itself, crime fighting is even an antiquated concept. Crime is not anywhere near as much of a trend in our world as it used to be. Does crime happen? Sure. But not like it used to. Despite conditions worsening, America has been lucky to combat rising crime with a treats economy. TikTok, YouTube, Amazon. My theory, and maybe there's been some studies on this, but I do think that instant gratification has played a major factor in not as much crime occurring these days. Even though, of course, instant gratification is also a problem and has severe consequences on our attention spans. And obviously, all of these corporations are doing heinous things to our society and humanity. But boycotting comes with privilege, and as much of an advocate as I am for boycotting, with material conditions worsening by the day, it is a difficult thing to do for most people. So back to Batman. Is this story arc really about fighting people that are less privileged than him? Or is it about somebody with a lot of privilege using that privilege to prevent atrocities in his community? Everything that makes Batman super costs money. And none of it really seems to be making him money back. It's just like an altruistic money pit for him. There's no ROI in this. That stands for return on investment, for those that aren't familiar with capitalist brain rot terminology. He doesn't benefit from it. In fact, he suffers a great deal from it, which is why aligning him with any actual billionaire in our world, I think, is just not the best idea. Not because I care about Batman's public approval.
You go back to April, May, look, the clear majority of Americans thought that the country was on the wrong track.
But because you're not painting the proper picture of what our billionaires actually are by comparing them to Batman. I mean, if we had Batman on our timeline, I'd take him over any billionaire that exists. Our billionaires are Lex Luthor. They're funding genocide, they're causing atrocities across the globe, climate change, and they're keeping you from a living wage. Let's also not forget the story of class in Batman. It's certainly not the most materialist Marxist story, but there's a pretty obvious class structure and contrast between Bruce's class in Gotham. Gotham usually only displays two different classes, the poor and the rich, which is becoming an increasing reality these days. Ra's al Ghul's whole arc was about purging the corruption that Gotham had succumbed to. And Batman comics even often show how pompous and out of touch the rich are. I'm not going to sit here and say Batman is actually kind of socialist. It's too inconsistent throughout all the adaptations, and I don't think you'd have a case for that. I'm done with this apple. Kobe. I made that. Nothing but net.
Liar!
No look shot as well there. But is Batman capitalist propaganda? I don't believe so. I think that, again, a lot of things in our system, just by default, live within that system. There's a reason why so much of the country still doesn't understand why capitalism is so bad. Normies and Batman writers are again projecting the reality that they live in, as are most people in our society. As leftists, we can admit that it is difficult for normies to maybe imagine a better world without caving to our worldview. There will naturally be some capitalist tendencies from artists that have only ever experienced capitalism, and those writers are still capable of writing interesting storylines. The fact that the social conditioning in this country can breach something like art, which is typically supposed to speak against these things, speaks to how powerful the hegemonic propaganda in this country truly is. But still, why do we think they chose Batman to be rich? Well, none of the rich people in his class would expect Bruce to be Batman, because no one would expect the rich to do that, who have historically been all about self-preservation, which is, of course, only an increasing problem in our world. It is a unique storyline, which is what you're always striving for as an artist, and it's especially unique with how old it is. Back then, there was nothing else like it. But it's also a commentary that the rich are not typically good for Batman to be the only rich person doing this. But they use fiction to their benefit. Not to say, billionaires, please be better. But I think simply to say to people, be a hero. To say that as a simple for good, something can be incorruptible. Something can be everlasting. And yeah, I guess that's kind of a quote from the Nolan trilogy, which also explores those class dynamics in all three movies. There's also the Absolute Batman arc, which explores the left-leaning fighting the system Batman, where he had a mother of middle-class social work background, or in the animated series in episode 12, where he stops a CEO from burning down a low-income community, or in Batman Caped Crusader, where there were themes of combating capitalist greed. But again, there have been examples of brutality against petty crime, like the Arkham video game series, where he certainly does some unnecessary things. It would be interesting to see the ratio of Batman content kind of in an ethical sense, good to bad. It seems like for the most part, Batman has not been on the wrong side of politics. He's even called out police brutality in some issues. I do think the Arkham video game series kind of gave Batman this bad rap, as that was one of the most popular mediums of consuming Batman in the last decade. Sometimes you have a writer that's edgy, sometimes you have a writer that's woke. And in the end, it's up to you how you want to perceive Batman, because it is a mixed bag. But it does seem like the majority of Batman comics don't stand for brutalizing petty crime and also stand against a corrupt system. I don't really have a strong thesis in this video. It's really just shooting the shit. But I will say to practice some nuance and research when talking about incredibly important issues online. When it comes to Batman, I understand why some people only look at the content that they have consumed, because it's Batman. It's fiction. It doesn't matter. But other things do matter. And when we rely upon only things that we've experienced to determine our worldview, facts and nuance get left out of the equation. And the more that we can evaluate the full picture of what's occurred with any issue, the more we can erode decades of conditioning and propaganda. So the moral of the story is embrace nuance and try to understand multiple perspectives with empathy and research. Most people don't have the time because of their exploitative day jobs to look into the most recent Batman and Robin Goes Woke Part 3. But when it comes to the important issues, we should always advocate to zoom out and look at the full picture.